it's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another Stanley Cup final edition of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by Michael Traikos, and our special guest joining us yet again, Bruce Boudreau. And we've got a lot to unpack. Holy smokes. Game 4 was legendary. It delivered. It had ups, it had downs, it had everything that you could imagine for both teams. So let's just break it down real quick before we get into the questions. So Edmonton down 3-0, looking dead in the water, comes out, scores 4 unanswered goals to make it 4-3. Florida ties it 4-4 with 19.5 seconds left. We go to overtime, and then Leon Draisaitl gets the game-winning goal. The series is tied. And Bruce, I think it's safe to say heading into this game, a lot of people talked about how the Oilers needed a statement win. They certainly got it. First team in Stanley Cup final history to come back and win after trailing 3-0. So how does a win like this change things for Edmonton? And just talk to us a little bit about how awesome that was to witness.
Well, it was awesome to witness. It was great theater. It was great TV and everything. But, you know, what I said after game 3, I said, I look at it and I go, hey, man, it's only 2-1, and we're anointing Florida already because they beat them bad. You know, like, I mean, and I say the same thing after this game. Okay. Like, I mean, it's 2-2 now. Like, I mean, I don't think Edmonton's got momentum. I think every game's a different day. I think if anything, it'll make Florida mad because they've blown 2 3-goal leads in this in this series, I think, against these guys right now. So, I mean, it's but it makes that no lead is safe. Both teams can turn it on. I thought, quite frankly, Florida was so much better in the first period. Like, I mean, obviously I was wrong, but I wouldn't have taken out Skinner because I thought he was the whole reason it was only 3-0 and it wasn't 6-0. But Pickard came in and you know, I mean, they know things that I don't know, and boy, did he gave them a lift. He didn't have to stop much in the second period, which was great, but I think just his presence gave him a lift. I would have liked to have been in the room to hear the kind of talk that was going on by Knobloch in between periods, because they came out of the gate like no tomorrow in the second period, and once they scored one, I thought they certainly looked like they believed and that this game wasn't over, and it looked like Florida said, "Uh-oh, this is going to be close." So it was it made for great theater and a great game.
Yeah, that was easily the gutsiest performance that I've seen of the Oilers this playoffs, Bruce. And I had a number of people, you know, texting me after that first period saying, see, Toronto was closer than you think because this Florida team can blow you out like no one else. And, you know, that's what I was expecting. You were probably expecting the same thing, Katie, is, you know, we were in for another 6-1 or even worse, just a lopsided win by Florida. So for Edmonton to come back, you know, that was their statement. And, you know, I know they had come back from 3-0 in a series last year, but let's be honest, if they were down 3-1 going back to Edmonton, you know, basically that series is over. So this was as close to a must win that Edmonton needed. And like I said, you know, just a real mature effort by the Oilers because, you know, they didn't give up. They didn't pack things in like the Leafs did in games 5 and 7.
And you know what? It wasn't like a 5-minute spurt where they scored the goals in Florida. It just kept coming and then coming, and they'd score and then they'd score. And even in the third period when it was tied, they took advantage of a turnover where it was a great forecheck by Ryan Nugent-Hopkins because he was the only forward left on the ice, and it was 4 Florida guys, and they still couldn't get it out. But you know what I thought was funny? Didn't Corey Perry score with 19 seconds to go to tie it up that other night?
And they said that this was the second latest tying goal in the history. The first one came earlier in the series.
Like it was like within a second of each other. I thought, I'm going, wow, this is crazy. So I really foresee this thing going 7 now. Like, I mean, It just everything written about it. It looks like it's got 7 written all over it. So it's going to be epic if we can use those terms anymore. And I'm really looking forward to the next 3.
Well, certainly something changed, right? We saw the way that the Oilers came out in the second, but there also a change came from Florida, I think. Was it more Florida doing something different or more Edmonton doing something different in your mind, Bruce, in that second period to change the complexion of the game?
Well, to me, once they scored, it was like they were confident. It was like they said to each other, "Hey, we can win this game," and that's the way it looked. And then they came out and they played like it. And you know what? They were getting that was the most Podkolzin had played, even though it was overtime. I mean, I think they used their bench better. I think if I was to say one thing, and I know I'm just drifting a little bit. I would not use McDavid on killing penalties because he stays out there for a minute and 20 seconds, and then when it's over, you can't come right back with him. Like, for example, when Draisaitl got that penalty, he was on for a minute and a half. So by the time you want Draisaitl coming on and McDavid coming on, like,
Right.
I mean, so I mean, I'm thinking he's not scoring and they're getting scored on. So why don't we use somebody else and save Connor for offensive situations only, because he hadn't scored in the previous 2 games and stuff, and the penalty killing wasn't doing great. So I mean, I was just wondering if that was my only wonder. But I mean, now nobody's going to complain about anything they did because they won the game.
Yeah. You mentioned penalties, Bruce, and as a coach, like, what do you make of the inconsistent refereeing that we're seeing in this series? Because, I didn't think that Nurse tripping call should have been a call. You see the high sticks go one way, but they're not getting called against Florida in that period. Let's be honest. If you take away those power play goals and, the 5-on-3, which, you put any team on a 5-on-3 and they've got a great advantage of scoring. Edmonton was really done, poorly by the officiating, I thought, again in game 4. And I just don't know what the standard is anymore. So as a coach, what do you make of this? Is this one of those things where, would you be talking to the head referee and, telling your GM, hey, like, what do we do here? Because it just seems like it's a bit one-sided.
Especially the first period looked a bit one-sided completely. And I wouldn't just be talking to the ref. I'd be throwing F-bombs like there's no tomorrow out at him.
Exactly.
And then I would be talking to the supervisor the next morning. I would be having the GM talk to the supervisor. Like, I actually thought, we were texting a bunch of us, and I'm saying, I'll bet you the supervisor went in between periods and periods 1 and 2 and said, hey, boys, you got to at least call it for both teams.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
there's a high stick behind the bench or behind the net, and you could see the head snap. You can see the stick go, and it was definitely a high stick. There was a high stick on the 3rd goal that they didn't count, and that they didn't call, would have negated the goal. And yet I agree with you. I thought there was a ticky-tack penalty in the first period against Edmonton, and it's going like, no. You guys aren't getting any breaks here. Now, the one thing we don't know is we don't know the chirping that goes on between the Oilers and the referees, because sometimes, and I've been in this situation where you're giving the refs so much heat and you're so rude and so disrespectful that they're just saying, I'm not calling anything against you at any point in time. Now, I don't know if that's happening or if that's not happening, but it certainly looked like they were getting the raw end of the deal in the first period, but like they made up for it in the second period. And in the end, the penalties were 4 versus 4. So, I mean, everybody says, oh, that was pretty even, but the game to me was basically over after the first period, if it had gone according to Hoyle type thing,
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a different discussion. We talked about this before the call, Bruce, if that game ends with Florida winning 3-1 or whatever it is, and nothing changed, because that first period was really where things got out of hand. Speaking of the first period, right? So Stuart Skinner gets pulled, Cal Pickard goes in. Bruce, first of all, were you surprised as a coach? Was that something in your mind that you would have been thinking, okay, maybe a goalie switch up is what we need here? Because it wasn't really a Skinner issue. And then the second question would be, is Cal Pickard the guy now, at least for game 5 and maybe beyond?
I believe, and I've been wrong many times, but I got to believe Cal Pickard is starting game 5.
Yeah.
And especially with the series being 2-2, definitely starting. He's 7-0 in the playoffs. So I mean, you got to run with that record. Even though you look at everybody was saying before yesterday, Stuart Skinner in Game 4 is 6-0 and his record is so great. Blah blah blah. But when he came in, he allowed 1 goal. He didn't have to do much, but he made a couple really good saves when he had to make the saves. So I thought that was vital. But you got to start him, I believe. I mean, I think if you don't start him, you're going to be questioned left, right, and center, especially if you lose. Like, I mean, I thought that they would allow Stuart Skinner 1 more goal because he played so well. Quite frankly, he made when he made that first save off Bennett in the first minute when he dove from one side to the other side. I went, oh my God, this guy's on tonight, And he had Florida must have had 10 bell scoring chances in the first 10 minutes, and he was stopping them all until the 5-on-3, but obviously I've said this my whole life that the coach knows the players better than anybody else, and we can question them all we want. We can from afar, we can be critics in that, but he knows, and he pulled them for a reason, and it obviously worked because they won the game.
And I wonder, doing it in the intermission, Bruce, gives Cal Pickard a chance to, warm up in the bench area, or sorry, in the dressing room area. It's a completely different scenario than when Peter DeBoer pulls Jake Ottinger after a timeout and surprising Ottinger, and we know how that kind of blew up in Dallas's face and in DeBoer's face. But I think Knobloch, has a handle on this team. Obviously, he goes to his players in the room and makes that decision. And, it probably wasn't an easy decision either. Like, we forget, Cal Pickard was hurt in this playoffs, and he had gone basically a month, a little over a month between, when we last saw him and then when we saw him in Game 3. So not an easy situation for Cal Pickard, but I think giving him that extra time during the intermission made a world of a difference.
Well, it always does, because you don't want to embarrass your players. I mean, if a coach can afford to do it. I mean, I always used to look at the clock and go, we got 3 minutes. Can we get through 3 minutes before I pull him? Because I don't want to pull him where he's coming out and you got to go in front of the crowd and everybody else. So it doesn't look good for them. I mean, sometimes you have to do it because the goal is just not on that night. But if you can afford to get it to the intermission, and then you just go tap the other guy in the pads and say, Cal's going in for the next period, we need a boost. It's nothing. I would have told Stuart Skinner it was nothing. You played great. We had 18 shots on goal, and I mean, they gave the puck away in the third goal. Is you may as well have said, here, take a shot from the slot, we'll see what can happen. So I mean, but it's so much easier when you can do it that way. I think Pete's mistake was he wasted 2 opportunities in one thing. You either call a timeout, you give the players crap and say, let's get going. And then if they score another goal, then you can pull the goalie. But you wasted it by pulling the goalie and calling the timeout. If you even had to pull the goalie after 2, that gives them about a minute and a half to scream at the players and say, see what I had to do? I didn't want to do this, but you guys aren't playing well enough, and I got to make a change. So, I mean, and then Pete compounded it by being stubborn enough after the game and going in and doubling down on it, then because he didn't want to look like he made a mistake. And Pete is a little bit like that sometimes.
Well, he paid the price for it, obviously, because the last time we talked about Pete, he still had the job with Dallas. Obviously, that's not the case now. Sure, he'll be landing somewhere, because again, he has so much success in in playoff scenarios. But that was just, he made a mistake. He doubled down. He paid the price. All right. Well, we have an interesting scenario in this series now, because it's a quick turnaround in terms of big travel between Florida and Edmonton. And these guys get right back at it on Saturday. So there's not a whole lot of time in between from a physical standpoint, mental standpoint. Bruce, if you're the coach of either of these teams, I guess from Edmonton, they're coming off the high of this comeback. Florida's coming off the disappointment of letting the comeback happen. how much as a coach are you saying things to your team? Is this where you're leaning more on your players and your leadership in a scenario like this? I guess how do you navigate the momentum swings of a series in terms of getting guys ready for the next game?
Well, I think this was different because it's only a 2-day break rather than a 3-day break. I mean,
Mhm.
I would have, if I'm the visiting team, we're going back to the hotel. We're having a good meal. We're talking about it for an hour or so. And we're saying, okay, we got a 10 o'clock flight or an 11 o'clock flight tomorrow, and we're traveling during the afternoon and getting there and then having a pregame skate and talking about stuff because I mean, the last thing you want to do is get in a plane last night at that hour
Right.
and fly all night because that means the next day you're exhausted. Like I don't know if you've ever been in a plane with the players. They don't, they won't sleep. First of all, they can't sleep. They're still wound up, and
No,
so
they
they'll
play
they'll
poker or
play
whatever.
they'll play cards for
Yeah.
5 straight hours or 6 straight hours, and so they don't even realize that they're tired until they get in their own bed, and then and I did this once. It was the biggest mistake I think I made in coaching, and and then because young players will sleep most of the day, get up, eat, and then go back to bed or lounge just doing TV, and then the following day they're so lethargic because they did no activity. This is why I thought it was great. What Edmonton did was come right back on the ice the next day after they lost. And I mean, I thought it was an incredibly smart move because the last thing I want my players to do is sit around on the beach in Florida and just think about the game or how we blew the game instead of getting out there, having a little bit of fun, realizing, okay, that was just one game. We're still down 2-1, and let's go at it. So I thought it was a brilliant move by Chris.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think? I mean, in terms of just and maybe the mindset. So I think when I was talking about this with someone last night, they're like, if there's any team that's going to be, unfazed by something, dramatic like this happening, it's probably Florida. They seem unflappable a lot of the time. Do you get that sense that this is probably, if anyone's suited for this scenario, it's going to be them?
I think so. We always hear from Paul Maurice, and that clip often gets shown. Like he prepares for a series to go the distance. So,
Yeah,
you
the seven
know,
games, right?
yeah. So whether they were up 3-0 or up 2-1, and now it's 2-all, Paul Maurice is thinking, okay, how are the Florida Panthers going to react when it goes to a game 7? And I think everything that their whole style is predicated on wearing you down to the point where when it gets to that game 7, Florida has a little bit more energy, and maybe Edmonton is just walking around sort of like a walking wounded type of scenario. So they have the experience. This is their third straight final. Obviously, that's going to put a lot of miles on the body, and it's a lot of hockey that the Panthers have played. At the same time, that does work into your favor. Like they've seen every sort of scenario. I don't think they like the fact that they're blowing these leads. I
Yeah.
think that is a bit uncharacteristic of the Panthers. Like Bruce and I were talking, not that long ago about, this is a Panthers team. When they smell blood in the water, they really go for the jugular like no one else.
Yeah.
So that's a little strange, is the fact that they were up 3-0, and how do they let that lead really kind of disintegrate, even though they did tie things up? So that's probably what Paul Maurice is focusing on, is playing a full 60 minutes, as cliche as that is, rather than just being happy with the first period and then sort of coasting.
Yeah, I mean, you knew that game was going to take a little bit of a turn because you knew that penalties had to be called the other way, and that's. Uh, but you know what? It didn't seem like a comeback where Edmonton just kept coming at them and coming at them. I think that they were very opportunistic when they did get the chance, and there's not I mean, you're not. It's not going to happen every day where Podkolzin gets a goal and assist. It's just
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
going to happen. And I really like Pods. I had him for a year and a bit, but he's just not that kind of player. But it didn't look like there was any panic in Florida's game, even when it wasn't look it. they didn't score, and then all of a sudden Edmonton had the puck in their zone for 2.5 minutes and going, oh, this game has turned. This game has turned. It went, and then a few minutes later they scored another goal. They were great shots too, the ones that they scored on, especially Nurse's shot. But once he scored that, I think they turned around to each other and they said, boys, we got a chance here. We're back in the game. And I think that built Edmonton up more than anything by saying those words or by doing that, by accomplishing that. The one thing I did notice is there wasn't one scrum after a whistle last night.
Yeah.
Not one. And I mean, you could see both teams were told, hey, let's play within the whistle. Let's not be stupid again. Yeah, we got that out of our system and they're not going to do it. Let's play the game. And they did. And I thought that was great. Great discipline.
Yeah, much different extracurriculars than we saw from Game 3. Bruce, I know we had you on to talk about this whole series before it kicked off. So now that we've got 4 games under our belt, is there anything that has stood out as a surprise to you, something that you didn't expect in a good or bad way?
Well, I mean, I guess the one thing is the inconsistency of Stuart. The Skinner in net would be the one thing that then being pulled twice now would be the thing. I just other than that, I mean, I think before the start of it, we've had 3 overtime games out of 4. Yeah. Like, I mean, and that very well could have been a double overtime game. We all thought, I think everybody, that it was going to be a 7-game series, and I think one of the things that a lot of the people would say, well, it's going to be 7-game series again, but this time Florida has Game 7, or I mean Edmonton has Game 7, so that's how it's going to end up, right? But so the only thing that surprised me at all was the game 3 when I mean it got a little bit out of hand and stuff. That's it, and that the refs were letting. They could have called so much more in that game. The slashing, the high sticking, and everything else. You know, I got a theory that it'll never be used, but I could end all this stuff, all the high sticking and the minors and that in a hurry, especially if you go down. Like, I mean, if you get like everybody now, they get hit near the face, and you see it all in the replays, and they show them it didn't even hit him. Like, it hit the top of his helmet, and they're throwing. Like, I mean, you got your concussion guy out there, and you're supposed to, if you get hit in the head, you're supposed to go see the concussion guy, right? So, I mean, if you either went down because of a high stick, or you threw your head off and you took your helmet off and you wiped your head and you're going like this, and you had to go to the concussion spotter for 15 minutes and you weren't allowed to be on the power play, I think that would end an awful lot of that stuff. Right now, they would suck it up, go to the bench, put their head down, and then just wait to get back on in the penalty. That's what I thought of the day.
How about this? Just make them go without a helmet, Bruce. Like, you know, it seemed like people were safer with their sticks when they had no visors on and no helmets. Like, you knew that a guy didn't have protection.
Well, there was more respect for sure. Like, I mean, but now they all have the shields when they're 5 years old, so they don't worry about, you know, brushing a guy in the face or anything with the stick, and they carry it up like we used to talk about. Keep your stick on the ice all the time, like this, going into the corners. Now they come in with the sticks high, and as a coach, you sit there and you go, "How do I teach this?" They've been doing it for 20 years. They can't stop on one word of saying don't do that, and it's very difficult. But I mean, they're so well protected. You know, I don't know. But to me, that's the only way to stop it, because it gets to look a lot like soccer, where they're flopping all over the place with these high sticks. And they're not, and yet some of them are warranted, but a lot of them, I mean, they look like they've just been shot, and they're checking. Can I grab some blood? Just let it bleed a little bit, you know, just one drop. And you see them looking inside the mouth as if they're a dentist. Sometimes, you know, hey, there's something back in your throat. Yeah, I see something back there. You know, like, I mean, give me a break, you know.
Bite your tongue real quick.
Yeah. Well, I know the guys, if they got hit in the mouth and they thought there was something, they would bite down on their lip to try to get it, or they would squeeze their nose trying to get blood out of their nose, like, just to make it a 4-minute penalty. So, I mean, It's that's the one thing I'd like to see change, because I think hockey players are known for their toughness, and I don't want it to ever be known that it is like we're feigning injury and stuff like that, because this was the one thing we had over the other games, that it was such a physical game, and if you lost a tooth, you just went right back in there. And we used to laugh at baseball players, like, I mean, oh, what, he got spiked in the thumb, he's out for the month, they got a blister on their finger, and hockey players used to laugh at that. But I mean, so I don't want it to get away from that. I think that's something that says hockey.
Yeah, hockey tough. That's what they're known for. It's legendary. I mean, they're just a little bit nutty too. Let's be honest. Trying to create blood. All right. Well, the last Cup final that had more overtime games than this was Toronto and Montreal back in 1951. That had all 5 games requiring overtime. We've seen overtime in 3 out of 4 so far this series. Do we think that it can match? Do we think that there could be a 5 overtime scenario with the remaining games that we have left?
Wow,
I think so. I think it's more likely we get more overtimes than we get the blowouts. Just based on how well these two teams are matching up against each other. Like, let's remember, like, they've seen so much of each other. Like, going back to last year's final, obviously. So this, if we get another 7-game series, that'll be 14 games that the Oilers have played the Panthers. So they know each other's game, backwards and front. I don't think we get any blowouts, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a couple more, maybe 3 more overtimes.
Yeah, I don't know if we could get 3. That'd be pushing it, but
a lot.
I mean,
I think handle that.
I think there's going to be at least one more, and you're right. If it goes 7, that's 14 playoff games they've had, but in the 4 regular season games in the last 2 years, so they've played each other 18 times. And like, I mean, I'm sure like this year, especially, each time they played them was both teams got amped up a little bit, because the one team wanted revenge, one team wanted to show that they're the better team. I don't even know the outcomes of either one of those games, but they were a high level intensity type game. So these guys know each other right now. I don't think there's too many surprises. I think Florida's got the game plan on how they can at least detain a little bit of McDavid and Draisaitl, even though it didn't work. Draisaitl is such an opportunist. I mean, even that goal shouldn't have gone in, and it was off the defenseman and in the net, right? I mean, he was trying to make a play on it, but I mean, that's how these goals go in, when you got 2 evenly matched teams. But it certainly is a lot of hitting. It certainly is exciting, and when they play within the whistles, you can see the look on their face that both teams want to win so bad. I think that's what makes hockey fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny watching McDavid's reaction on the bench with the winner. He didn't even look excited. He looked so relieved. Like, this man has so much pressure, so much stress. He's like, oh, thank God. All right, keep going. We got to keep going. All right, real quick before we put a bow on this and talk about a little bit going on around the league. Game 5 predictions, score, and who's going to win.
Well, I always believe Florida's coming back, and they will win. I predict Klingberg will be back in the lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, poor Troy Stetcher, he makes that one mistake and he doesn't see the ice for the rest of the game. I felt pretty bad for him.
You played like 4 minutes, Bruce. That's
4 minutes. Yeah, and as soon as he made that mistake of the reverse that didn't reverse, and they scored goal 3, that was his last shift. So I mean, imagine too that with only the 1 day rest in between, quite frankly, they played 5 defensemen the last 2 periods and all the overtime. There might be a little bit of fatigue setting in on there, but I thought that will be the one change. I don't think Florida, unless somebody's hurt, will make any changes. I would bet every penny I ever owned that Bobrovsky's going to be the goaltender. I know that much. Yeah. And you'll see the same Florida come out with more determination. And if they don't make, and I think Edmonton knows that, and they're going to come back with saying, okay, we're not going to let them get the opportunity to beat us in our building again. So I mean, it should be very interesting.
I'm thinking Edmonton wins this one. They go back to Florida, and with Edmonton up 3-2. The guy I'm looking for, Katie, to kind of make a better impact is Vander Kane. He's got one
promoted last night.
Yeah, 1 goal in this series. He spent almost more time in the penalty box, it feels like, than he has on the ice. This series was supposed to be tailor-made for a guy like Evander Kane, especially with Zach Hyman out. You think that a guy who plays this physical would just be feasting on the Panthers, but he's been on the wrong side of the, he's been in trouble more than he's giving the Panthers trouble. So, I'm just waiting for him to kind of, make it all click and have an impact. But, maybe game 5 is where he finally, takes control and asserts himself in a positive way.
This has been his whole career, though. You
I
want
guess you're
more.
right.
You just want more. Like, I mean, he's big. He's really tough. He can fight as well as anybody. Great shot and strong. But then he's almost like Kreider in my way that this may be a segue into what we're going to talk about next. Is that some days he's there, some days he's not, and you always are looking for more.
Yeah,
Well,
no shots last night, which is just surprising.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to do better than that.
Bruce set us up for the perfect segue because we want to go around the league and a big trade happening between Anaheim and the New York Rangers. So Chris Kreider goes to Anaheim along with a 4th-round pick in this draft. New York gets Carey Terrence and Toronto's 2025 3rd-round pick. So Bruce, kick it off with your thoughts on this move by New York. It did feel like Kreider's time there was up. It was sort of just a matter of where he was going to end up. So what do you think about the trade and maybe what else the Rangers might be looking to do this summer?
Well, I mean, they needed money. I mean, because they want to do something.
Yeah.
And if they don't get rid of something, they only had like $8 million to do what they want to do, and they still got Cooley and somebody else, I think Miller, to re-sign. So I mean, they have to do something to get some money. I think it's a really good move for Anaheim. And even if he's 34 years old, even if he is a little long in the tooth, I think it's going to show the Anaheim fans that, hey, boys, we're tired of being in last place. We're really going to try to make a move to get up there. Now, they've got a lot of good young players in Anaheim, but now they've squeezed in the Killorns, the Gudises, the Kreiders, the leadership group. And let's not forget that Anaheim had the worst power play in the league, or at the bottom of the league, the last couple of years. Kreider, when he's playing the way he's supposed to be playing, is one of the best front men in the game on the power play. And so I think that's going to be like, I mean, they had Zegras there last year. And I mean, that's quite a difference between having Kreider and Zegras in the front net and the power play. So I think overall, and I think Anaheim's going to make more moves, but I think this is a great start for Anaheim to show at least their fan base that we're trying to improve. And that's going to be a big thing for them. The Rangers, it depends on where they spend their money now that they got a little bit extra. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It's New York. They want to make a big splash somewhere. I mean, they're probably looking, saying, hey, I'll give Sam Bennett $10 million and let's see if he wants to come to New York for 8-7 years, something like that. Like, I mean, New York's going to do something. I'm not saying silly, but something that is going to draw the attention away from the Knicks hiring a new coach, from the Yankees winning and Judge and everything else, because they need the attention a little bit there too.
Mitch Marner, Bruce, $14 million to the Rangers. Let's make it happen, okay?
You know what? It would be
silly, right?
it would be good. I think they'd have to get rid of Lafreniere, though. They got a lot of soft forwards up there in front. You know where I thought, and no one talks about it, and I'm probably so far off base on this, but if I was the Chicago Blackhawks, I would be putting in such a play for Marner. Because I mean, like, to me, what's his name? Who's
Bedard?
the big Bedard is going nowhere. He's just losing all the not only the charisma and everything else, but all the stuff that we told that he was a generational player and studio. Nobody even talks about him. Nobody talks about him not going to the World Championships, not being on Team Canada. He needs somebody that can set him up because he's a shooter. Austin Matthews is a shooter. Like, I mean, Mitch Marner would be the one guy that could really make Bedard the player that Bedard is supposed to be, I think. And I mean, they need more than that, but I think that would be a start if you're Chicago and you want people to start filling the seats again.
Yeah, who did Bedard get to play with this year? Like, I'm totally in agreement with you.
Tyler or Tuesday.
Like the good
Nick
players,
Foligno.
but great players.
No,
Like you can't
listen.
do it alone. You see it everywhere. You know, every team, every superstar has a guy riding shotgun with them. Whether it's McDavid playing with Nugent Hopkins, whether it's Matthews with Marner, like Kucherov gets to play with Point. Like there's no one doing it
Everywhere. Everywhere. And you look at it when they first, like, I'm not all that convinced Chicago's really knowing what they're doing, to be quite honest. I mean, when they first got Connor, they signed Taylor Hall and Corey Perry to play with them. That's not the two guys that are going to get you 50
Nope.
goals and make you like you were a Dennis Savard or something of that ilk type thing. So I mean, now they had Nick Foligno playing with them last year. A lot of Ryan Donato. Now I give Ryan credit; he got 30 goals. I had him in Minnesota when he was first coming up, and he's a good. He's got a great shot and he's a good player, but he is not the game breaker kind of guy. And the reason you get 30 goals in Chicago is because you're usually losing and you're not really focused on, oh yeah, we got to beat this, we got to make sure that they defend. So Ryan gets opportunities. But I say that, but I really like Ryan Donato. I think he's got some real good skill, but that's how losing teams have usually one guy that can score, because the teams that they're playing against really aren't that focused. They know they're going to beat them. So let's not they don't give their best game a lot of times.
Yeah, like they're putting up 7 goals, so the Blackhawks are getting 4, and he's scoring a bunch of them. I mean, we talked about
someone's got to play on your power play. Like every team's got some guy who's gonna get goals because he's on your power play. Like I remember Jason Blake signed with the Maple Leafs, and he had scored 40 goals the year before, and I was like, oh, maybe you score 40 again. And he's like, no, I was on a team that had no one, and now I'm going to a team that's got Phil Kessel and James Van Riemsdyk and Joffrey Lupul, and now I'm 3rd or 4th on the pecking order. So
let me tell you a quick story about Jason Blake. Okay, when I was with LA coaching the farm club, they sent him down, and the first game, like, Jason Blake is the hardest worker, but he ends up getting everybody to hate him. Okay, and so the very first game, we get a power play, and he's on. 10 seconds later, we get 5-on-3. He comes over to the bench, and this is his first day in Lowell, where I was, and he says, Coach, this is what we're going to do out here. I want this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy to play on the power play with me, and this is how we're going to do it. And my eyes went like, I mean, okay, if there was daggers in them, they were gonna kill you. And I said, Jason, get on the bench. Don't say a word. Shut up. Just stay there. I'll play you again when I feel like playing. Like, I mean, because he was a real cocky guy, but he was also the hardest worker, and he got everybody hating him. And I'm wondering if his kid is like that. Like, I like Jason in the end, but I mean, boy, he could get under your skin pretty easy.
Yeah, his kid looks like Chip off the old block. In that.
Yeah. I've always often wanted to just talk to somebody to see what he was like, because I think that's the truth.
Well, we talked a little bit about the Blackhawks there earlier. Former Blackhawk Jonathan Taves is making his return to the NHL. It's reported that he's narrowed his list down to just a handful of teams. One of the teams is Winnipeg. Another one is Colorado. So a few teams circling around. So where do we see him landing, and why do we think, he's maybe keying in on teams like Winnipeg and Colorado? Where's a good spot for him, Bruce?
Well, Winnipeg's home.
Yes,
so
I
can see that. And Winnipeg hasn't been able to get over that hump. And I mean, even though they might have great leadership, Jonathan Taves is known as a superior leader. I mean, he'd have to be their second line center. I don't know if he's good enough to be a second line center after having a couple years off and being he'll be 35 or something like that. Colorado seems to me like a safe spot for him. McKinnon plays 25 minutes a night. If you could come in there and just do your job and distribute a little bit, because I don't even know if they have him. Did they trade Casey Middlestat? Because I never liked him.
They still got Brock Nelson because
they got rid of Middlestat. It feels like they're looking for a 3C, because I'm not sure they were overly.
He'd be a perfect third line center. I think any playoff team should be looking at Jonathan Taves. Like, you see how much of an impact veterans are making in these playoffs. Like Corey Perry, I don't know how he's scoring the goals he's scoring at age 40. Brad Marchand's not young anymore. There's a lot of veterans I think this summer are going to get looks, whether it's Claude Giroux, John Tavares, Jamie Benn possibly. But Jonathan Taves, if I'm a team that's looking to take that next step, his leadership alone, it warrants a look. But yeah, I like Colorado just because you're not asking too much of him, and it'd be kind of cool to see Taves on a team with Nathan McKinnon.
How would he look in Toronto? Like if they signed Tavares and you put Taves as a 3C?
It'd be pretty good. I don't even know who their 3C is right now. Like that's been a point of concern for the Leafs is, they traded for Scott Lawton to be their third line center. That didn't work out. They had Max Domi there for some time, but really, his leadership again, having Austin Matthews, this was his first year with the captaincy. Obviously, he's got Tavares there to learn from, but let's be honest, that there's a world of difference between how John Tavares is as a leader and Captain Sirius and Jonathan Taves. So, 100%. If I'm the Leafs, I wouldn't overpay for him, but if he's interested in playing with Matthews and company, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, because I don't think it can be about the money for Jonathan Taves. Like, I mean, he's not going to get the $750 that Corey Perry got, like in Montreal or anywhere. But he's going to, I think in the $3 million range. I mean, Jonathan Taves would be a pretty good gamble.
And especially at that age, you don't have to work. You can load it up with bonuses. So you can really work the contract that way. It could be something where you go base level $1 million and then just load it up with, if you make the Stanley Cup final, if you play X number of games, you check off certain bonuses.
He's supposed to make his decision before the draft, so we should have that one answered coming up here pretty soon because that is quickly approaching. All right, let's get into some rapid fire, but first a reminder that you don't need to break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro-level composite stick without the pro price tag at Stix.com. That's Stix.com. All right, we had some awards announced recently, so I want to get a quick yes or no. What do we think? Do we agree? Connor Hellebuyck named the Hart Trophy winner as an MVP for the league. He's the first goalie to win it since Carey Price did it, and it was close. Hellebuyck was at 1,346. Leon Draisaitl right there, 1,209. So a close race in the voting. Bruce, do we agree with Hellebuyck taking the Hart?
No, you know what? I don't like to be old school too much, but I mean, I think when you only play 55 games or so, and that I mean, the goalies have got their awards. The Hart Trophy is for the Hart Trophy is for a player that is other than a goalie. And I mean, even though as great as Hellebuyck was, I still think another player should have won that.
I'm going to go counterpoint on this one. I don't have a problem with Hellebuyck. The award is adjudged to, the player adjudged to be most valuable to his team. You take Hellebuyck off that team, that's a completely different Winnipeg Jets team. They obviously won. They won the President's Trophy basically because Hellebuyck was able to just, guide them there. And then the other thing is, Kucherov leads the league with 121 points. It wasn't the it's not like he put up 150 points. I don't know how many points the leading scorer had a year ago, but, it seemed like a little bit of a drop off. And, people were splitting hairs between Kucherov and Draisaitl last year. So, I didn't have an issue.
All right, final two before we let you guys go. Who is more clutch, Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid? Bruce?
Well, at this stage in the playoffs, I got to go Draisaitl. I mean, he's got 4 overtime goals right now?
Yeah, most in NHL playoff history.
Yeah, I think still as this sound stupid, but I mean, he still flies under the radar when he's playing with Connor McDavid. So I think the focus is always on Connor McDavid, and he can, as great as he is, he can still fly under the radar a little bit. But I mean, he certainly, if you look at these playoffs and you look at games when it comes to goal scoring, for the most part, he's the guy that you look for. Connor sets him up, but when you're talking clutch, to me, it's goal scoring. I'm still going with Draisaitl.
Yeah, I agree with Bruce. And what a difference a healthy Draisaitl has made for Edmonton. It seems like the last two playoffs, he's always battling something injury wise. This year he finally looks healthy. For me right now, he's my pick. If Edmonton wins the cup, he's got to win the Conn Smythe.
I like that.
Or Pickard if they win it.
Yeah, maybe.
It'd be hey, listen, I won the Jack Adams and I was only there for 50 some games. So I mean, he can win the Conn Smythe with only playing half the games or a third of the games.
Yeah, I mean, if he keeps playing the way that he has to help his team, then he's going to deserve it just as much as anyone. All right, last one, guys. It's been such an awesome Stanley Cup final so far. So finish this sentence. This is the best Stanley Cup final since. It's the best series.
You start, Michael.
I don't know the year off the top of my head. I'm probably going to screw it up. I think it was 2022, but I will say Colorado, Tampa. That was just, it was great hockey. That was, one where it was skill versus skill. It was, Stamkos and Kucherov and Point against McKinnon and Makar and Rantanen. So, for me, that was just a fun series to watch between those two teams. So we've been spoiled. Let's be honest. We've had a lot of great Stanley Cup finals.
They usually are when they're the two best getting there. I'm going to go back into the time machine, and I'm going to say the Islanders against the Oilers when the Oilers won their first cup after the Islanders had won 4 in a row. I just thought, and that's really aging me, unfortunately, but I mean, it's just, it was just like a turning over of a new leaf and watching those Oilers, those young Oilers beat a team of so many Hall of Fame players. And I can't remember if it was in 5, 6, or 7 games, but I mean, I just remember it being a real big change in the game in the way hockey was played after that playoffs.
Oh, I love it. We've got some good series. We've had some good series. It's the Stanley Cup final, and we want it to go 7 games because these are the best teams, and you just never get sick of watching these skilled players battle it out.
Normally, I would have said 67 because it was the last time my Leafs won the cup, but I didn't want to go back that far.
A little too far. Hopefully you get some new Leafs things to cheer for here in the future. All right, guys, so much good stuff to talk about today. Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us yet again. Game 5 is going to be just as exciting, and we hope we get 7 games of this, maybe a little more overtime. Who knows? The Stanley Cup finals have certainly delivered. That does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm Katie Gaus, Michael Traikos, and Bruce Boudreau. Thanks for watching.